Hey, Dr. V, welcome to the Leaders Lab. Good to have you.
Hey, it's great talking with you, Ken, and great to also see another Tony Robbins fan.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I was a fan. We were just talking about it right before we hit play. And yeah, kind of ironic that I think we were both heading to the same seminar right before COVID. And that to me was the official kickoff of COVID was when Tony Robbins isn't doing live seminars anymore, like something's going on, right?
Yeah, but it just goes to show the power of the pivot and of perseverance and continuing to do the work and figuring out a way to still deliver value when the world was shut down.
Totally. That was one of those moments where you went, yeah, I mean, if you're in the industry of putting people together in large facilities, right? Like
Hmm.
thousands of people, you'd be like, well, it's just time to hang up our cleats for a bit, right? We'll just take a break. But yeah, they did find a way to pivot. He's reaching more people than ever. But I am so glad to have you to the show. I know you've got a super interesting background that I'd like to hear more about before we get into, I consider you like the longevity master. I want to get into that. But what led you to that? Because it wasn't a straight path at all for you.
Yeah, certainly. I didn't seek out to be a longevity and performance expert, but it all just stems back from, I think, for many people, they become the expert in what they needed most. And for me, it was really living a life that was aligned to myself. And once we get to that place, we'll really access the energetics of longevity and peak performance. So just to backtrack a little bit, I am a medical doctor. I was trained in diagnostic and interventional radiology, got trained at the National Institutes of Health and the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. And then 7 years ago, at the pinnacle of what many people would say I achieved success, fancy house, fancy car, chief of interventional radiology at my hospital, getting everything that I was told was going to make me happy. I looked in front of the mirror and saw somebody who was overweight, diabetic, had high blood pressure, and was on prescription medications. Me, as a medical doctor, didn't actually have the tools to be energetic and to be well. And that was a big wake up call. And fortunately, the universe, when it nudges you, gives you a lot of clues as to maybe why you're not living your life in a particular way. And that very same year, I got my chronic disease diagnosis. I lost a close uncle to cancer. The person I thought I was going to marry left me for another man because I wasn't paying attention to relationships at the time. And I also got a tear in my shoulder, and I was told I might not be able to do surgery anymore. My
Wow.
entire life, like working towards this thing, potentially could get pulled from right underneath me. And so that was a huge wake up call. And that's when I started to do the deep personal work that led me to longevity and peak performance. Number one, it was just reversing my chronic disease. And what we weren't told in medical school is really how you live your life as medicine. And when I started to really understand that, I actually reversed my conditions in a very short period of time. Once you change your state, and Tony talks about three things changing your state: your physiology, the meaning you give to things, and the focus you give to things. Well,
Hmm.
in my research, I find that there's five key things that really change your biological state, which is physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and social. All those things are energetics that we're giving to our DNA, messages we're giving to our DNA. And that actually drives whether or not we are in peak performance and live a long time, or whether our body's in a stress state, which leads to increased inflammation, decreased immunity, leaving us prone to chronic symptoms and chronic disease.
How did you? I know you've got your medical training, but a lot of what you just said is contrary to traditional medical training. So, how did you know when you're kind of on the mat? Life is, like you said, it's teaching you lots of lessons over and over again until you get the lesson, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, how did you go there? It sounds like you pivoted fairly quickly and went, what I'm doing isn't working. I'm gonna have to start thinking differently and start thinking, way outside the box. How did that come to you?
Well, great question. I think it's just, following intuition and
Mhm.
following probably things that start to make you feel more expanded, starting to make you feel more inspired. And so, I would be remiss to talk about this transformation without talking a little bit more about my backstory, because that backstory will lead people into understand what forms the old programming in their mind and their ego survival mechanism that is created that actually also creates disease. So I was actually born in post-war Vietnam. I was a refugee. We spent 8 months on a refugee boat, the only infant to survive. I spent another 3 months in a Philippine refugee camp, and then I came to America with nothing.
Wow.
And I remember growing up, we were, certainly very poor. I had holes in my hand-me-down clothes. That, my mom sent me to school with all this Chinese food that I was constantly teased for. I got a lot of your "go back to your home country" chinky
Uh,
type of comments. So as a kid, I grew up thinking that who I was just simply not enough, that I needed something more than myself, success, money, all these things to be worthy of love. And I think the human experience is just that, that as kids, the human part of us forgets that we are loved, that we are worthy, and that we are connected. And instead, when it forgets that, it takes up adaptive mechanisms and behaviors that form who we are. For me, I was somebody that thought I wasn't enough, so I needed to always achieve success, something outside of myself to feel that way. So my entire life was, how do I get the A? The A? How do I get more attention on stage? How do I succeed? And I was chasing. So the part of our nervous system that does this, scientists are beginning to understand more, is something called the default mode network. It's a primitive part of our brain, our 2 million-year-old brain, that is always learning how to survive and how to actually exist in the world. It's the autopilot mode of our brain. And so this thing just downloads information. It doesn't matter where it comes from. Teachers, parents, media, television, our society, and it also remembers the things that hurt us most, and that becomes who we are, our ego. For me, it was somebody that didn't feel enough, that needed to chase success. Now, here's the thing, living from that place, living from that ego space, living from that survival space, it does something to our physiology. Your body constantly thinks that you are under attack or in stress when you're in that space. So it's going to drive up inflammatory markers in your body. It will lower your immune system, and it'll basically make every single cell not function optimally. So those people will be prone to getting chronic symptoms and chronic disease. And
Ken, I
so,
love. Oh, sorry, I
go
love
ahead.
talking.
Yeah.
Well, no, because I love this stuff. I love this subject. Like literally, if you said what's the one thing I want to talk about all the time, it's maximizing human potential, longevity. I just turned 58 the other day, so I'm
Yeah.
like, I got grandkids. I'm all about staying on the planet for another 50 plus years, and but it's really unique. So I talk to a lot of people that are mindset only people, and it sounds like you're a big mindset guy, but you're combining the mindset with, you're a doctor, right? And you're combining it with like proven, like, hey, this is what happens in the body when you're thinking this way. So anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt, but it's just so cool for me to hear it from not just a theoretical point of view, like, hey, having the right mindset is going to, point you in the right direction. We know that, but you're actually saying, hey, having the right mindset is going to reduce illness, reduce inflammation, reduce chronic disease, right?
Absolutely. And I think the science is starting to catch up with what a lot of spiritual teachers have been telling us probably for
Yeah.
centuries now. That basically, energetically, what we think about, what we feel, our physical body, the people that we're around, and whether or not we know that we're connected to something bigger or just this meat suit on our own, all those things actually contributes to the energetics that are happening within our body and that spread from our body. And what we're finding molecularly is that there are actually changes in our DNA when we shift the way we think, the way we feel, and the way we behave.
That is so cool. That is so cool. Well, so keep going. So you had this growing up. You came over here. You're getting bullied in school. Your identity's being formed around that. That
Yeah.
leads you into I mean, from when you were young, did you know, like, because you wanted to be successful, because you wanted to make money, did you know right away you were going to become a doctor? I mean, was that just the
No,
push
I
the whole
actually
time,
wanted
or?
to be, in entertainment. I always thought that I would, wanted to, I looked up to people like Tony Robbins, like a Robin Williams or Mick Jagger. I think I enjoyed being on the stage and performing, but, certainly no immigrant parent will say, okay, go ahead and become,
Sure.
an entertainer. It was a
Right.
doctor, an MD or physician for me. But there was still that part of me that had this bamboo ceiling, that as an Asian American male, not seeing myself on TV or only seeing caricatures of myself on TV, I didn't think that was possible for me. And so I thought probably the best thing that I could become in this country would probably be a physician. And so I strove and chased these things. And it is no wonder there's a quote that was attributed to the Dalai Lama when he said what he found most interesting about humanity. He said, man, because he would sacrifice his health in order to make money and then sacrifice his money to recuperate his health. And I think, this is really the hero's journey of many human beings, is remembering that we are born enough worthy, love, and connected, and remembering almost also that we got sort of hypnotized and programmed into forgetting that. And the place coming back to that is really the place of healing, is really the place of longevity and peak performance as well.
Yeah, yeah. Couldn't say it better myself. That is super cool. So you said it was only 7 years ago when
Yeah.
all the stuff hit the fan. So like 2016, it sounds like 2015,
Yeah.
2016. What was the final straw for you when all of that was going on? Was it the girlfriend leaving? Was it was it your weight? Like when, or was it just something that you just got satiated with enough of the wrong
Yeah.
stuff?
I would probably almost attribute it to one moment that was that was an aha catalyst.
Yeah.
I remember rounding one day at my hospital, all these things that already happened. It seemed like the worst year of my life. The consciousness of Kien, the person that needed to be successful, the person that needed the house, that needed the job, that needed, a wife that looked a certain way, all these things, nothing was going that person's way. And I remember rounding the hospital and I pick up a chart. It was a 43-year-old male with terminal pancreatic cancer. And I was asked to drain 10 liters of fluid from his belly. And I remember as I was approaching his room about to do this procedure, I was thinking, man, I'm going to meet this guy that's going to be worse off than me. I better, put myself together so that I could be there for him. And as I was doing that, I opened the door and I remember this huge smile coming from this young man's face. Hey, doc, how are you, man? I can't wait for you to drink this fluid because it's getting in the way of sexy time.
Oh my God.
And I'm thinking, oh my God, he just knocked me out of my state. In
Yeah.
Tony Robbins' world, we talk about the emotional state that we're in. He just knocked
Yeah.
me out. I was like, oh my God, this is a pattern interrupt. How does this guy this happy? So I asked him, and his name is Ishmael, how are you so positive or happy right now? He says, doc, trust me. I didn't always used to be this way. I used to be angry all the time. But, after this, I realized the only thing I can control is how I choose to show up. And I choose to show up with love and positivity, man. That's it.
That's cool.
Yeah. And then at that moment, I was like, wow. He demonstrated to me that no matter what life circumstances, we can always choose. And there was that aha moment, like, okay, did I consciously choose the way I was living my life at that point? And I didn't really know at that point. I just realized my life just wasn't working. So I tried lots of different things from that point on. Number one, I really focused on my sleep, nutrition, and my movement. That changes my physiology a lot. And when it did, I had more energy to do different things. I then started to, study with spiritual shamans. I, did, things like Tony Robbins. I studied with people like Bruce Lipton, Deepak Chopra. And what I began to really understand as I started to study the people that lived the longest and performed the best all over the world is that how we live our life, the choices that we make, who we are, who we're being, the energetics of who we are can actually be our medicine or our poison. And when I studied the people that live the furthest around the world, I'm in the field of longevity and performance. And yes, I prescribe stem cells, exosomes, these fancy tests, all these things in the science, what I call the science of longevity to people. But if you look at where people are the happiest, where people live the longest all over the world, they don't have access to any of this stuff. What is this telling us? It's telling us that how they are living their life actually is something. And then I dove into that a little bit more. Dan Boytner wrote the book, The Blue Zones, and really studied where people lived the longest and why they were living that long. And then he noticed patterns. He noticed that they moved every single day. They didn't have to go to the gym or run marathons. They just moved every single day. They biked everywhere. They walked everywhere. They didn't stuff themselves with food. They occasionally celebrated with wine. And the two most important things is they had a deep sense of connection and community, and they all felt connected to something bigger. They all had a sense of purpose. And I studied each one of these lifestyle factors now that we have better molecular biological tests. You actually see that when people live that way, it changes their biology in the DNA level.
Wow.
That's what I found amazing, that how we live our life is medicine. And the things that most affect our state that we can control are 7 things: sleep, nutrition, movement, our thoughts and mindset, our emotions, our community, and then our sense of purpose. That if we use these 7 levers and make choices that are more beneficial to us, we're in this thrive state, what I call the thrive state. Tony calls it peak state. I call it the thrive state. And that actually turns on and activates the biology of optimal health, longevity, and peak performance.
And it's funny because I've seen on the blue zones, and I remember looking specifically at like Sardinia, Italy, and you're looking for like this magic pill that they're taking down there, right? Or there's some kind of fish that they're eating that we don't have, and it's like, no, they're connected, like you're saying. In fact, when you said like they don't have to run marathons and stuff, in fact, it's kind of the opposite of that. They're moving, but they're not doing. I feel like in our culture, we're either overweight and inactive,
Mm-hmm.
or we're running on a treadmill all the time, right? Like, and I've probably been in both camps at one time or another, right? Where it's like,
Right.
I can't exercise enough. I'm constantly counting calories and putting mileage on and stuff like that. That's truly amazing. So in your book, you go into this in much more detail, I know, right?
Yeah. So in the first edition of my book, I really talk about the thrive state. I really say
Right.
that basically it's a way of thinking, feeling, behaving, and choosing that will activate the biology of peak performance, longevity, and optimal health. I just recently released the second edition of my book, where I go in a little bit further. And I said the people in thrive state were actually the people that were resilient during the pandemic, whether it be an individual or organization. That also the thrive state is something, this energetic, we actually are wirelessly connected to each other.
Yeah.
You could feel my excitement. If I start scowling, you'll feel it too. We've got these wireless connections. And so just as much as fear can spread through a population, so can joy, so can connectedness, and so can all these things. This is why the people in the blue zones, I was just on an interview the other day with a gentleman that went to one of the blue zones in Costa Rica. He says, when you're there, you just feel different. It
Yeah.
doesn't feel like you're in a city. You just all of a sudden feel open and connected to the people there. There's an energetic. And so I talk about that. And then finally, I break into the science of basically the default mode network. This basically old 2 million-year-old brain that we have that is always used to kind of protect us from danger, but is also holding us back from who we truly are, from accessing our optimal selves.
Totally. I mean, we talk a lot about blueprint in here, and whether that's blueprint around health or blueprint around, money or success or whatever it is. And I do believe that life to a really big extent is like a self-fulfilling prophecy. I mean, I think if you believe that you're young, if you believe that you're capable, if you believe that you're enough, then your mind is going to automatically like start manifesting what it believes to be true and what it believes your blueprint is. And I feel the exact same way. And just like you, I've found myself in tough times where my wiring wasn't wired the way I just said. I mean, it was wired for, hey, maybe you're not enough. Maybe you can't do it. Maybe you are sick. Maybe you are fat. Maybe you are lazy. And it's like, so is the work that you do primarily geared around, I know you work with both individuals and like corporations, and you do talks and stuff like that, but do you really focus on that, on the mindset and on the blueprint first, so that you can then get to, I got to imagine that you can have all the medicine in the world and all the longevity treatments in the world, but if I don't actually believe it's going to work and I'm not on board, it ain't gonna work probably, right?
Yeah, it's really taking a combined approach because,
Right.
you take probably a 50 or 60-year-old man who is who has lived a certain way for a little while. After the age of 35, men start losing testosterone 1% a year. And if those levels are low, and if you're living in a state where your lifestyle is contributing to the reduction of that, it might be hard to feel the boost to move forward. In which case, for some selected people, you may want to start them on hormone replacement therapy. I find that it is helpful for women after menopause, within 10 years of menopause, starting on a hormone replacement therapy. And certainly for men, over the age of 40, if they're starting to have symptoms of low testosterone, to have their hormones optimized. There's peptides and things like that of that nature as well. But there are certain people that decide not to go that route and just want to focus on the lifestyle. And that's the other thing, is there's so much we can do there as well, that I feel like so many longevity clinics, if they're just focusing on the peptides, on all this anti-aging stuff, and you forget about the lifestyle, you're basically not addressing the big hole in the ship that might be driving the state, and you're just replacing things probably more than you would if you address the person as a whole.
Yeah, well, like you said, I know I'm being repetitive, but it's like a leaky boat, right? We were just
Yeah.
throwing water back in it. It's like, well, you're still doing the stuff that might, right? Like you're saying, there's physical, natural things that are going to lead to my testosterone going down. By the way, I want to talk about my journey on this too, because I have actually been on hormone replacement for probably at least 5 years, and I've recommended
Yeah.
it to some friends, and yeah, it's been really good. Um, but yeah, but there's also those contributing factors that we can control to some extent, right? Our diet, our exercise, how we treat
Yep.
ourselves, our enough sleep, and it's like if we're not fixing that, we're just patching something that just keeps leaking. So yeah, I started on this. It was funny because my wife, I think I'm stereotyping here, but I think that in general, in the past at least, women have been more open to something like this. And I know I'm generalizing the entire gender over one over the other, but in my case, that was the case. So my wife was looking at hormone replacement, and all this. I mean, I just seeing is believing, kind of, right. So I remember
Yeah.
her doing it, and I was like, "What's going on with you?" Like her energy was better, her mood was better, like
Mhm.
everything, and she just loved it. And she's like, "Oh my god, yeah, it's just this hormone replacement. It's not difficult to do." And I was like, "Cool, give me some of that." So I started probably 5 years ago, just doing like testosterone injections. I do them
Yeah.
myself. I've
Mhm.
tried a pellet, but I prefer an injection. I just feel like it's easier.
That's my preferred use. You can titrate it, and certain times, if your lifestyle's a little bit off, you could always like titrate a little bit more for a particular week, if your lifestyle has been off, and it'll actually help you feel a little bit better. So I feel like you have a much more better control, rather than having a pellet that, if dosed incorrectly in the beginning, could be disastrous.
When you had your kind of epiphany, I'll call it, right, 6, 7 years ago, so you knew that your life was out of balance, and you knew that you wanted to change it, and you sought out these like spiritual teachers and business teachers and everything else. When did that like kind of come into the thing of like you're the longevity guy now? Because it doesn't sound like you really were prior to that, right? You were focused on some
Right.
other areas of medicine. How did all of this all of a sudden come together in this package that was optimal health, longevity?
Oh, great question. Well, so, I really sought just to make myself better.
Yeah.
And so I sought all the answers to make myself better, including getting an additional fellowship and board certification in anti-aging and regenerative medicine. And once I started to apply all these principles, I noted that, okay, not only am I reversing my conditions, I'm biologically aging backwards
Right.
on epigenetic tests. So the thing is, when we get to realize the old paradigm and program of the ego space that's holding us down, those things actually increase our symptoms, our propensity to get chronic disease, and also our performance. But if we realize that, and we start to make choices in this new energetic state, the side effect of that is optimal health, longevity, and peak performance. So really, I was just trying to just y- get away from my real self. But in really doing so, when you step into who you really are, which is connected to the entire planet and everyone else, when you realize that, when you realize that you are loved, when you when you act and serve being who you are, this passionate, purposeful person, your body just reminds you that's who you are, and it gifts you with these side effects of longevity and peak performance.
And when you found it, it just seemed kind of like a natural fit for you then to move forward as that guy, it sounds like, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, initially it was just trying to get rid of the symptoms, but
Yeah.
realizing the things that have caused the symptoms was just an old way of being that is not who you truly are. And when you step into authentically who you really are, you remove disease and you remove the blockages that actually activate your biology as well.
That's really cool. Have you got any I don't know if pushback is the right word, but this is a progressive way for a doctor to be, right? And for a path for you to pursue. Do you get any pushback at all from your medical peers?
I think initially people were wondering, okay, you got trained in this really high technical field. Why would you start to leave? Well, one, I was burnt out.
Mm-hmm.
And I would probably say right around the time I left full-time hospital medicine, there was some people questioning. However, if you were to take a poll of physicians right now, about a third of them would consider quitting their jobs in the next 2 years. So I think that initially there might be some question because most doctors are usually very secure. They follow the path of what they're supposed to be doing. But
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, many people have to deal with insurance, have to deal with basically um, potentially unfair pay and potentially how they need to practice, that they're starting to feel really burnt out. And so I think people are starting to understand that potentially the culture and who we were trained to be during our training does not actually link up with a thriving life.
Right.
That's why I find so many physician coaches are stepping up now, because people are realizing that there is a reason why there's the burnout. And for many people who've given up themselves and their own self-care in order to care for other people, they tend to be the ones that are most affected.
That's yeah. No, I think I'm. It's really good to talk to someone who's kind of a pioneer in this area or leading the way because it's going to take that. It's going to take people with traditional medicine backgrounds embracing the new medicine or, embracing these other parts of life that like you have, like spirituality and all of that. So if someone's sitting on the couch right now listening to this, not in their best shape, not in their best mindset, how do they get started? How does this rewiring process begin for somebody that I mean, hey, I've been there where you're like, okay, I know I need to do something, but like where do I start? This is a big job in your mind at that point, you know?
Great question. Well, I would probably say you can start by picking up my book. Then
Yeah.
you'll understand the 7 most important things that most affect your state. And here's the thing: there are many things you could do in each one of these 7 categories. But if there is something that is in there that is going to require very little activation energy for you to do, such as maybe going for a run or sleeping better or trying, a breathing technique or whatever it might be, anything you do there will actually change your state. And if you feel that change, okay, maybe you could start doing it again and you start to build momentum. If you look at all those 7 things and say, oh my God, this is really daunting to change all these areas of my life, you don't need to. You
Right.
just need to pick the one thing that is simplest for you to do. That's like, oh my God, I could do that in my sleep. And if you turn that into a habit and you turn that into something that's the new identity of you, you'll notice it shifts your state. And when you do, you could pick on the next thing, then the next thing, then you slowly start to evolve back into who you're meant to be. And I think throughout this process, it's also learning who you're not, because there are times I'm down on myself. There's times that in my mind I get into stress, worry, anxiety. Then I realize, oh my God, this is actually the default mode network. It's not
Right.
actually who I am. And if you could start to separate yourself from that thing, because that thing normally holds you back from what you want to be, you know, basically you're running, if you're in an area of your life which you're not happy from, it's that program that has led to that result. So what you need to do is just free yourself from that program and make new choices as to your new self and identity and run something new. But it takes some time to actually realize, oh my God, that thought is not my thought.
Yeah, Kien,
You know, those
what
thoughts
you're
are just downloaded, right?
agreed, and yeah, what I like about what you're saying, especially the way that you're phrasing it, is I think what most people think. Well, like, so the question I asked you was, what about the guy on the couch and where does he get started, right? Well, the guy on the couch normally thinks, well, this is who I am, and what I want to be is more like Kien or more like Ken or whoever, right?
Mhm.
And but the way you phrase it is like, no, that's not who you are. Who you really are is this thing you think you want to become. What you really need to do is just shed all the BS that you've put on yourself from your life conditions, your stories, your environment, your parents, your job, like whatever it is. If you can just get rid of that stuff, the real you is under there, just waiting to come out.
Exactly. And it's
Yeah.
just, you're going to have to chip at it because we are
Yeah.
habitualized to be this way for a long period of time. And so breaking the habit of being that old self
Yeah.
takes a little time, and it takes a little awareness, and it takes certainly a lot of compassion for yourself as you're in that journey.
When I think, and it takes practice, I think it takes repetition. I have a friend who's really big in the recovery space named Tommy Rosen, and he talks about connecting to consciousness. And I really like this. It came from an AA thing where it was like connecting to God. And it was like, that sounds really heavy to a lot of people. But connecting to consciousness is more like, hey, can I just take a pause here and decide if what I'm doing is part of that default network or if what I'm doing is actually a conscious thought that's going to serve me, serve others, serve the world, and it's that pause. There's beauty in the pause. There's beauty in just going, oh, bag of tortilla chips, which by the way, I ate way too many last night, but I could have taken a pause and said, is this the best decision right now? Right? It sounds like such a small thing, but I think there's such power in not being on autopilot, not letting those programs
Ooh,
run,
yeah.
you
Yeah,
know?
I got goosebumps here because it reminds me of a quote that I built a process from. It comes from Viktor Frankl. And for people who don't know
Yeah.
Viktor Frankl, Austrian Holocaust survivor, saw his father being starved to death, his mom and brother murdered, it's all friends and family members tortured. But he had this to say. He said, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response.
Hmm.
And in our response lies our growth and freedom. So he's really talking about that pause. He's really
Yes.
talking about, can you separate yourself from the default mode network versus the person you truly want to become?
Yeah.
And so I have this impact process. I am PACT. The P stands for the pause. You're creating that space. So every time you want to reach for the chips, you're feeling lazy on the couch, or you want to yell at your spouse because you get triggered, pause. Have awareness of what's going on. Okay, I'm reacting now. I want to punch back or whatnot. What is this? Oh, it brought up some feelings of not being enough. And I'm feeling like I need to react now. Oh, okay. So you got that awareness. Next, you choose, who do you want to be? And you choose from your I am. And we could all design who our I ams. But the three most important decisions when you say I am, I feel is I am safe, I am love, I am connected. Those are the three most important ones. And you could also be I am joy, I am, generous, whatever it might be. But when you choose from that place, you're choosing from a place of who you truly are. And
Right.
then you take a new action rather than the actions that you might be habitualized to. And the more and more you do that with every single choice in your life, because every single choice could either be your medicine or your poison. When
Right.
you recognize that and you take that pause every single moment, you can start to rewire your entire body and nervous system into who you really, really are.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's funny because when I first started hearing concepts around this, what we're talking about, it didn't sound like much to me. It was like, oh, okay, yeah, pause and think about what you're saying until I started trying to put it into practice for myself. And I realized just how reactive I was.
Yeah.
Someone says something on the phone. I'm talking to a client. They say something. I don't like the way they said it. I assume it means X, Y, and Z. Pretty soon, like, you know, the cat's out of the bag at that point, right? It's hard to put it back in. And so it's like, can you just make a choice that again is more congruent with who you really are?
Yeah.
And like you said, I mean, I like the fact that it starts with I am, because it's like, well, who are you? You know, what do you stand for? And really kind of identifying those things. And this sounds like such a long process. I mean, I think if someone's like new at hearing these kind of talks and going, well, what, every time I'm going to go get a bag of chips, I'm going to run through 6 things in my brain. And it's like, well, kind of, but it happens in a split second, really, right? It
No,
happens in,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. It
it's,
all happened in a millisecond. And here's the thing too,
yes,
like you mentioned reaching out for some Doritos every now and
yeah,
then. Okay, enjoy it.
yeah,
Tony, talks about zigzagging. There are
yeah,
things you want to enjoy in life, but you realize, that there are some consequences, if you choose to do certain things, and you
right,
become more conscious of it. And you could be like, okay, you know what? Today, I'm just going to enjoy the bag of chips. Or, you know what? I'm going to enjoy being sulky and sad and a crybaby for a couple of hours. But then you get to choose, where you want to be. It's I think for most people, it's the unconscious choices that they make from the old programming that they'll always repeat life being the same.
yeah. That to me is autopilot, right?
Yeah.
That's just, I'm going through the motions. And that's how I think most people are. Like when you talk to them, they're going through the motions. They're not sure why they're doing what they're doing. It's just what they're supposed to do. You know, I'm supposed to go to this job and feel this way and come home and do this, and it's like, it's okay, like you're saying, to have a, and you will have a whole variety of emotions, and you should allow yourself all of those. But if you do it consciously, you're going to have a much better designed life, I think. So that's really cool. So I'm curious to know, like, who are some of the people in this space that are like your heroes? Because I'm thinking as you started talking, especially with us having some shared, rooms that we're in, Peter Diamantes. I'm thinking of maybe some other people, but who are you studying from and learning from these days? And he's more of a
Yeah,
futurist, but
I really find myself kind of stuck in the middle of two things, and
yeah,
when I give keynotes to organizations, I talk about two things. They bring me in there talking about health, happiness, and human potential. And I feel that there are people on the side of David Sinclair, Peter Diamandis, Peter Attia, Mark Hyman, that are in the longevity space. And it's really the science of longevity.
mm-hmm.
Then on the other side, you've got more spiritual teachers like a Deepak, like maybe a Bruce Lipton, but Tony, I feel has elements of that as well that really share that, hey, there is a way we live our life that actually changes our energetic as well. People in that space also like a Joe Dispenza.
Yeah.
And really, I'm sort of like the person that has been in both of these worlds. So when I talk about health, happiness, and human potential, it is really the science blended with the art together is how I approach the answers to health, happiness, and human potential.
So you like all those guys. You're just going to take nuggets kind of across the board, I would
Yeah, I'm
think.
going to
Yeah.
take nuggets and feel what's right. I want to be able to take from the spiritual people, but like, okay, where in the science does this make sense? So let me blend this together. I don't want to take something spiritual and like, okay, well, this is a little too woo-woo for me. Is there an energetic explanation?
That makes sense. I like that. What is your definition of purpose, and how can, in your mind, having a sense of purpose, how does that affect our biology and performance?
Oh, that's such a great question. Um, so, when I help people optimize their human body, we have to look at every single cell and what it does, right? Every single cell exists to do its function. The heart cell contract, the kidney cell to extract the toxins, the lung cells used to bring in the oxygen. They all are doing something. They already are programmed to do that. As they exist, they're just doing that, but they're doing that for the whole ecosystem of the human body. And so they're doing their thing, but they're serving everything that's around there because it's connected to everything, because we're interconnected and we need each other. I used to think finding my purpose was something so hard. Oh man, I got to go find my purpose. Pablo Picasso says the meaning of life is to find your gift, but the purpose of life is to give it away. And I only think he's half right. I don't think it's a matter of finding who you are naturally as a person, the things that light you up, the things that bring you joy, the things that, open your emotions up. That's who you naturally are as a person. That's
Mm-hmm.
the authentic you. And
Mm-hmm.
when you share your authentic you, whatever it is that you do with others and you're serving them, because really humanity is an entire organism that is made up of us because we're interconnected. When we just share who we are with the world, that's our purpose. I don't think we need to find our gift because we are the gift.
Ah, that's a really cool answer. I like that a lot. And I really like it because also, Kien, it makes me feel sometimes when someone says, well, what's your purpose? What's your mission? Right. And it feels like we're under pressure to be like,
Yeah.
here it is, right, in a nutshell. And it's really hard, I think, sometimes to define ourselves to one thing, right? And I don't
Yeah.
know that I want to be defined to one thing, but we don't need to be, like you're saying. Like at the end of every single person I've ever talked to on this podcast that has had great success, and most of them have, it all eventually leads back to service. It all eventually leads back to
Yeah.
connection and contribution, right? I mean, at least for the people who have had what I consider like true success, where they're happy, where they're well rounded, right? It doesn't mean
Yeah.
they're just making money, but I mean, overall have it. So no, I love that. So talk to me a little bit as we get into wrapping up now. How do you work with organizations? How can people get in touch with you, and what are some of your common challenges you see when you're working with these bigger companies?
Okay. Yes. So, um, I work with individuals and organizations, and I
Yeah.
really look at them as ecosystems. I look at, and what ecosystems share. It doesn't matter if it's an ecosystem like the economy, like the human body, like, an aquarium. There's three things. They've got independence, meaning each entity within that ecosystem has to exist on its own and has its own purpose. They're interconnected, so interdependent. They all depend on each other to work, like I was just mentioning in the human body. And they're also state dependent, that the energetic of what's going on in that space, whether people feel safe or whether people feel stressed, actually changes the entire ecosystem. And so I work with that on an individual basis where I can maybe consult with their science of longevity, things like, hormone replacement therapy, but also talk about the mindset things that we had just discussed. Now, in an organization, what I find most often in the past and what's still going on is they look at human beings as human beings, but they look at human capital,
Capital, yeah.
and it's all on profits and it's all on productivity. But what organizations don't understand is that if your people are stressed out, if they're not in their peak state, it basically is that suboptimal cell that is in the human body that would be getting prone to chronic symptoms and chronic disease. Very similarly, if you're not investing in basically the well-being of every single person in your organization, you'll find people are burnt out, people are stressed, they're not engaged, they're not performing at their best. So it's really setting the values together, reshifting the value proposition and looking at every single person, not just as capital, but as human beings. And how do you foster that? Because if they're going to be spending the majority of their life, and look, human beings want to thrive. Are you giving the culture, for somebody to say, yes, I want to follow you. I see this mission. I know what we're doing, and I feel valued being a part of this group. And so that's what I help organizations do, is sort of give them the tools to show them that they are a living, breathing organism. And I come in as a doctor to figure out which parts are off and how to actually activate their state so that they are in the thrive state, because there is a thrive state advantage, which is better productivity, better performance, better prosperity for their organization.
I see it as such a huge, like, I'm envisioning it almost as you're talking about it. I see it as like a huge, like, not only great takeaway for the individual, but as like a team building event in a way, because it's like, look, I've got to thrive, but so do you, right? Like instead of it being like, I think a lot of times in the workplace, it's like, for me to win, you have to lose, right? Like if I have to get that promotion, I
Yes.
have to be better than you. If I'm going to be the top sales guy, you can't be the top sales guy. But instead, this concept is, you know, like the rising tide lifts all boats is kind of the overall theme here, and I
Exactly.
really like that. Yeah.
And it's really looking at the organizations. Are your values and your incentives built in such a way for people to want to win together
Yeah.
rather than as the individual? Because if your incentives are not aligned to that, you've got people that are just out for themselves. And if you're starting to be out for themselves, the cell that's in the human body that's out for itself, that doesn't care about everybody else, is a cancer cell. And that's what could happen in an organization if it's not, set up the right way.
Wow, that was just like that's kind of a mind-blowing moment right there. I mean, first of all, I'm thinking about my own company and I'm like, okay, I think we're doing a good job, but I want to create some more like group and team incentives. But
Yeah.
yeah, the idea of it being a cancer cell, I mean, it just is, right? It's the outcast. It's the one that only wants for itself. It eats, it doesn't provide, it doesn't contribute. It only takes, it never gives, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Well, Dr. Vooz, thanks so much. I really, really appreciate having you on. And where can people find out more about your work? How do we find you? And we'll put all of this in the show notes, but please tell us.
Yeah, so I'm all over social media, mostly on Instagram at Dr. VMD, DOCTOR VMD. And you can find out more on my website, kienvu.com.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Come back anytime. I love this subject, love your insights, and I really love this balance between, mindset and kind of the self-improvement of the Tony world, along with just real practical medical applications. So thanks again. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Ken.
All right. Take care.